there is a worrisome trend that's taking its toll on everyday workplaces, and it's called quiet quitting. Now, this is the trend where employees put in a minimal amount of effort just to get through the workday. Ncumisa Madinda, a member solutions executive at Momentum Corporate, says this trend is a dangerous phenomenon that often masks underlying emotional and mental health issues at the workplace. Quiet quitting means that workers are lacking in enthusiasm and they've reached a point where work has lost meaning. So in studio with us, we've got Ms Madinda, who's going to be talking to us about this phenomenon called quiet quitting. So nice to see you. Welcome.
Good to see you. Thank you. Good morning, Leanne. Good morning to your viewers. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to talk about a very important issue because quiet quitting, I know we did an interview about this last year because it started gaining this... Nobody really knew what to call the phenomenon that many are feeling and behaving. And then suddenly this quiet quitting came about. And I was like, yeah, it's a good way of describing it. I've kind of tried to explain it. Perhaps you could do a better job.
Yes, quiet quitting is definitely a new phenomenon that we have seen post-COVID. And it's actually a subtle form of resignation while you are actually employed. And how we actually see it is that a lot of employees and individuals in general in our country and globally, they just disengage. They disengage emotionally, they disengage mentally, and in some instances, they avoid coming to the office. They disengage physically. And of course, how we also see this, we see that productivity levels are actually dropping. And this is due to quiet quitting. And we see that people are lacking creativity and innovation, and it affects overall performance of the individuals or employees in general. And of course, it's linked to the declining mental state of our employees in general, but as also indicated, it is a global phenomenon.
And it's a great worry because, like you say, the repercussions for the organization are massive, for the individual are massive, and I imagine for the individual's family is massive as well. So what makes an employee start to quiet quit? There's obviously got to be a lot of reasons that you start seeing it. Is it blamed entirely on management skills? Is it blamed on mental issues, or is it a combination? What have you found are the issues around it?
Sure, there are a lot of reasons for quiet quitting, and I'm probably just going to mention a few. One of the biggest actually is the COVID-19 pandemic and the trauma that people went through. And when we started with the COVID and the lockdown, we saw high levels of productivity. So people were really going far and beyond to actually say to their employers, here we are doing a lot more. And of course, they had to balance the professional life and their personal lives from home. And what happened a couple of months down the line, people started feeling fatigued. People started feeling exhausted. And it took a while. I mean, we were in this thing for 2.5 years. And people are generally describing it as being, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm fatigued. But it's actually beyond that because it affected our mental state. It's trauma, to actually put it simply. And of course, we see this as the biggest contributor towards quiet quitting. But the second issue is around socioeconomic reasons or the environment that we are finding ourselves in right now. If you think about the high inflation and the impact it has on our daily lives, how it affects fuel prices, how it affects food prices and everything else in our world. And linked to that, you would know that the interest rates are definitely going to go up if the inflation is actually high. And once the interest rates are high, and what we actually see at this point in time is that a lot of people who could afford certain things 3 years ago are no longer in a position to afford the same things 3 years down the line. And also, this now leads to inability to service your debt and inability to actually meet your monthly financial obligations. Now, the third one that I'm really going to mention being in South Africa is actually the energy crisis. I normally say that we talk about the energy crisis in the context of how it affects businesses, small, medium enterprises, as well as large corporates. But we don't often talk enough about how it disrupts our lives in our households. Nobody talks about that. Because if you think about it, you are struggling to actually have a routine at home. Think about if you have kids, you have a husband, you have to come back home and cook dinner and to make sure that the kids are doing their homework. And in most cases, you are unable to do so given the load shedding schedules that we see. And therefore, nobody talks about it. But it does cause a lot of anxiety in the system. It really makes people feel overwhelmed and anxious in most cases. And all of those factors, they do lead to quiet quitting when it comes to the workplace.
It's a massive phenomenon. I mean, and I'm glad you mentioned that aspect of it, because South Africans in particular, you live with a lot. You live with a lot that perhaps some countries don't live with. You know, the issue of load shedding is a very big thing, that you come home, you leave the house in the dark, you come home to the dark. You can't cook your food. You can't do simple things that, you know, perhaps people elsewhere take for granted because they have something called electricity. At the end of the day, you're still paying for it, you're not receiving it. You're getting poor by paying for a service you don't receive. Then there's the issue of crime, and it's a great worry. So even though these don't necessarily, they're not stemming from the workplace, it's everything that is weighing down on you, that you're almost quiet quitting yourself.
For sure,
and
for sure.
That's perhaps a big reason as well, is that you're sort of thinking, how much more fight do I have left in me? That's a question I think a lot of people are asking themselves.
Yeah. In fact, when we look at the Mental Health of the World report that was released in 2022, it indicated that actually South Africa ranks very low in terms of the health scores. Now, what that actually means is that South Africans are finding themselves in a position where they are more depressed than they were in 2020. So that is really something to take note of. Of course, everybody has gone through the pandemic. Of course, everybody is experiencing socio-economic issues. But really, there are added items, as you've just mentioned them, that are unique to South Africa, like load shedding, like crime, and everything else that happens around us. Yes, we are in a difficult position as South Africans.
So that's obviously the personal side of things. But let's look at a company now. And if you've got a staff force that are quietly quitting in front of you, they're doing the work, the barest of minimum. So I am doing my SOPs, everything that you've asked me to do. I may not be doing it with passion. I may not be doing it with vigor and offering to do more. What does the law say about that? I mean, is there that gap that says, look, we've got to let go of you? And you can say, but why? I'm doing my work. Yeah, but you're not doing it with that thing that I want from you. What thing do you want from me? You know, what does the law say about this?
Look, before we even get to the law, I guess this is one of those things that employers really need to pay attention to. Because remember, I said one of the ways we actually see that people are quiet quitting, they are totally disengaged and they lack creativity, they lack innovation. And on top of that, overall performance of the individuals is actually affected. And once the performance is not there from the individuals, then it spills over to the team, then it spills over to the organization. So organizations are actually at risk. Firstly, because there's going to be lack of performance and lack of achieving their objectives. And also just making sure that the overall performance that they are looking for as the organization is there. So it's going to be affected one way or the other. And they will lose talent because people are going to quiet quit for a long period of time, and eventually they might actually end up leaving the organization. So there's a couple of things that the organizations can do. Firstly, just to prioritize the employee well-being. And when we talk about employee well-being, it's really all-encompassing. We talk mental, we talk emotional, we talk physical, and also financial, because that's also part of well-being for the employees. But also, there are a couple of things, other things that the organizations can actually do. One, to create supportive environment that sort of fosters open communication between the employees as well as line managers, the staff, to actually make sure that people are sharing the burden, and we also know what people are actually going through. But the second thing that the employers can actually do is to encourage life-work balance. We've been talking about it for decades, but I think we have found new meaning to it after the COVID-19 pandemic.
Indeed.
So we really encourage employers to encourage their employees to make sure that they find this work-life balance. And one of the things, as an example, that we do at Momentum Corporate is to make sure that we have what we call Wellness Wednesdays, where we don't want to have any meetings in the afternoon on Wednesdays, to make sure that people take the time out to go and meditate, go and take a walk, and make sure that you become more balanced in your own life. So those are some of the things that employers can actually consider. And the last one is actually around what we call employee assistance programs. A lot of these organizations, they do have this program where a lot of employees can actually have access to a counselor when you're feeling overwhelmed and you are feeling a little bit depressed than usual, or when you're feeling a little bit anxious. You do have access to call someone and talk to someone online. But there's a couple of other things that you also get from this EAP program, such as financial coaches, having access to financial coaches, and also having access to retirement benefit counselors, access to Hello Doctors. So there is a couple of things, and a lot of organizations I know that they offer this program. So those are some of the things that really, before we even talk about the law, the employers can actually focus on.
And the look of an office has changed completely to how it used to be. Look, granted, myself, I'm not in the corporate environment, but when you speak to people that are in corporate, it's very different. You know, some are having days that they're at home and some are in the office. It's mixed. It's in fact, I was seeing something where they were saying as a global trend, 47% of the workforce, let's say actually higher, above 50% of the workforce, has never returned back to the way it was pre-COVID. They've completely changed the structuring of the way the business works, which I suppose is a good and a bad thing. There's also this trend of a 4-day week. I don't know, is that something that could possibly work? I mean, to try and help, don't take my money away from me, but let me do my work in 4 days. And perhaps that'll give me some energy and something to look forward to.
Yes, I mean, we would love a 4-day week.
Oh,
everybody would love, but I'm not so sure if the organizations would be happy about that. But I think what is important is to have that balance. Some organizations have actually accepted the 3 days perhaps working from home and 2 days in the office. But what is important is, what do we do in that 2 days that we are actually in the office? Because I believe that this is the time we need to use to connect with individuals.
Indeed. That's a big problem.
That's the time.
We've lost the ability to connect
with people and team members and all of that. So I think it's important for us, besides the 4-day work week, but it's important for us to make sure that in that 2 days we utilize it in a way that's actually going to inspire people and motivate and encourage people.
Quiet quitting, a massive talking point. It really, really is. But I think the even bigger part of that is the mental issues, the exhaustion that South Africans and the world went through during COVID, but how it in fact is all catching up with us now. But I'm glad we addressed that. Thank you. Thanks for coming in and talking to us about this, a big phenomenon. Ncumisa Madinda talking to us. He's a member solutions executive at Momentum Corporate, but talking about this worrisome trend that really is taking its toll on everyday workplaces. It's called quiet quitting. Both quitting on your work, quitting on your life. You put in the barest of minimum and you just get through and you just find no passion in anything anymore. So that's the reality. Talk to us. Have you ever felt that way before? Are you feeling that way? Have you heard of this phenomenon? Is it something that's affecting you? Love to hear from you at Morning Live, SABC.